Learning to make sourdough bread is one of the best decisions I've ever made. The internet has a million different ways to make this, and I've been making it for a couple years, so this video is just what I found works for me. This is really a 3 to 4 day process. So on the first night, I like to separate my starter into a different jar so I can clean the original jar and also make sure that I have the measurements just right. When I feed my starter, I like to make sure that it's around an even ratio. So I do about 60 grams of the starter, 60 grams of flour, and then I actually do just a little bit less water. You want the consistency of your starter to be really thick, and you do not want it to be soupy. The next day, I combine my ingredients in a bowl. I take about 375 to 380 grams of water and mix that up with about 100 grams of active starter. You can tell your starter is good if it's kind of spongy and it floats around in the water. You'll hear people call this the float test. Once that's combined, I add 500 grams of bread flour. I found that bread flour works better for me than regular flour. And I also like to go in with my hands just to make sure that it's all combined. Then I cover it with a towel and I let it sit for 30 minutes before I do my first set of stretch and folds. Stretch and folds are pretty self-explanatory. You're just gonna pull the dough up and fold it over itself. Doing this forms the gluten, which is going to give your bread structure. Some videos will tell you to just do 4 folds, but I like to fold it over and over until it feels pretty tight. You also don't want to pull it so high that the dough starts to rip. After each stretch and fold, you're going to cover it back with the towel and let it sit for 30 minutes. So stretch and fold, 30 minutes, stretch and fold, 30 minutes. A lot of recipes will say that you only need to do 3 sets, but I like to do 4 sets, so it will take a total of 2 hours. On the 3rd and 4th set is when I start to sprinkle in some salt. If you want the measurements, it's about 2 teaspoons, but I like to just eyeball it. The more stretch and folds you do, you can see that the dough starts to get smoother and a little bit more bouncy. And when you're done, you're gonna cover it in plastic wrap and let it sit on your counter for about 4 to 5 hours. This part is really important because you'll hear recipes say to let it sit on the counter until it doubles in size, but a lot of times when I was doing that, it was over fermenting and it was ruining my dough. Anyway, the next thing you're gonna do is take your dough and put it onto a floured surface and stretch it out a little bit so that it's a rectangle. You're gonna fold each side over about 2/3 of the way, and then you're gonna roll it up. Then you're gonna do a sort of tuck and pull. So you're gonna tuck underneath the dough and pull it towards you to create a little bit of tension. I like to line my Banneton basket with a cheesecloth, and I sprinkle a little bit of flour on top of that before I flip my dough upside down into it. Then your dough is gonna go into the fridge for at least a day. If you wanna do 2 days, it will taste a little bit more sour, which is what me and my husband like. But I don't recommend going any more than 2 days because then the surface of your dough is gonna get really dried out and it's gonna make your crust extremely crunchy. So when you're ready to bake it, you're gonna set your oven to 450 degrees. This is another part that can be done in many different ways. Some recipes will say that your Dutch oven has to heat up for an hour, but I honestly put my Dutch oven in there when the oven has already come to temperature, and then I just let it heat up for however long it takes me to flour my dough and score it. So you're gonna flip your dough upside down, and then you're going to put a generous amount of flour on top. If you don't have a little scoring tool, you can use a razor blade or a really sharp knife. And you can really make whatever pattern you want. The purpose of scoring is because your bread is going to expand, so you need somewhere for all that steam to escape to, otherwise it's just going to crack in all different ways. When you're done, you're gonna carefully place your dough into your Dutch oven. And I don't know if this makes a difference, this is just something that I like to do, but I like to flatten the parchment paper folds. So I usually take a wooden spoon and I just lay them flat so that it's not pushing into my loaf. And then I just take a pair of scissors and I chop off the pointy ends that are sticking up. Then you're going to bake it for 30 minutes. After 30 minutes, you're going to remove the lid, decrease the temperature to 430 degrees, and you're going to set your timer for 18 minutes. After 18 minutes, if you want it a little bit more brown on top, you're welcome to go ahead and do that. I just think that 18 minutes is a good time for me. When it's done, carefully remove it from the Dutch oven. And as tempting as it is to cut right into it, you really should let it sit for at least an hour. And there you have it. It seems like a lot at first, but I promise if you just keep doing it, it will get easier. And then you'll have to come back and let me know in the comments how you like to eat your sourdough. I like to take mine and dip it straight into the butter, or even with a little bit of honey drizzled on top.